Welcome to the Modern Agile Show. I am here with Sam McAfee, and it's a pleasure to be with you back in the saddle in this office. Been doing a lot of remote shows, so it's good to be back in the office making a show here with you. Welcome to the show, Sam.
Thanks, Joe. It's great to be here.
And you're heavily involved in what? What do you do?
I do work around product development teams. These days, I'm mostly working in large organizations that are trying to do either digital transformation or some sort of agile product development. And typically, these are companies that have heard the noise around lean startup and agile or maybe design thinking and are trying to figure out how is there any value there for them and how to kind of make these things useful for their teams.
Right.
Which is, it's a bit of a job to try to figure that out in their environments. So that's what I'm focused on these days.
Excellent. And you wrote a really popular post recently, right? Can you tell us about that?
Sure, yeah. So, I've been doing some writing for a while on Medium. I wrote a book a couple of years ago called Startup Patterns that kind of encapsulates this stuff. But I've been trying to continue to have conversations with people around what's the hard stuff around getting this work really going and having teams function effectively. So I wrote a post called Why Enterprise Agile Teams Fail. And it seemed to really strike a nerve.
Yeah.
A lot of people resonated with them, lots of sharing, lots of passing it around. And so it's been fascinating to see kind of which of the pieces that people are really connecting with, and the feedback that I've gotten has been pretty interesting.
So enterprise agile teams, so if you had to summarize that article, like what are the top things that you'd say? Like what are those reasons? Why do enterprise agile teams fail?
Sure. So I think fundamentally the main things that we discover when we're working with teams in that environment is there's probably a couple of different buckets. So there's stuff that's just at the team level in terms of how one does software development or digital product development in today's world.
Right.
Like we're talking.
Now, let me step back one second just to clarify here. When you say enterprise agile teams, are you already talking about not startups, but big companies?
Yeah. So I think there are definitely patterns in startups, or certainly startups that have achieved a certain size, where there is actually a lot of commonality.
Sure.
At a certain amount of scale, right? It's like, we got our first product success. Maybe we got a couple hundred people on the team now, and we're sort of plateauing and trying to find our next thing.
Okay.
Startups at that stage have sort of forgotten how to be startups.
Okay.
So they too, I think, have lessons to learn from this.
So that would fit into the enterprise agile space too.
Enough for this conversation, for sure. I mean, there's meaningful differences, but I think that the key thing, I guess, that I would start with is that there's any organization that has achieved success in a particular product area or vertical has operationalized that, right? Where you've had to build in a lot of structures on purpose and for good reason to contain risk and to drive out variability around, financing and legal and marketing and all these sort of support functions around a business.
Yes.
And unfortunately, when you're doing innovation work, those are the very things that get in your way. Right. So that's something where there's a whole bucket of stuff around the corporation structure in general that make it difficult for teams that are operating, that are trying to operate at speed and do sort of, produce things iteratively and get feedback from users or from the market. A lot of those corporate structures get in the way.
Right.
So there's a whole basket of stuff there. There's a whole nother basket of stuff that I think is related to that's more cultural. So we're talking about companies in the broad sense, most companies that aren't sort of your recent tech giants, that could be 100 years old and have been have grown up in this sort of 20th century industrial mindset. And so there's a lot of cultural constraints as well with innovation around moving from what is a rigid sort of top-down command and control style of management and support for staff, employees, to moving to more of a team model. Like, okay, we're collectively building this product as a team. There's overlap in terms of people's function.
Sure.
So
Right.
we find that there's a lot of things like incentives in HR, like how people are hired and what they're sort of incentivized around, that
Sure.
also gets in the way.
Huge.
So
huge.
those are two really big
Okay,
factors.
so administration and all that goes with it, from legal to, budgeting, and then also culture.
Sure, absolutely.
And the lack of an innovation culture.
Yeah, the lack of the right sort of mindsets or mental frameworks for
Yeah.
thinking about how to build a flexible, adaptable learning organization, right? It's like sort of, are you operating on this known business model, or are you trying to learn how to do new things?
Right,
And that's tough.
So how do you deal with that? Like, how do you, obviously you've identified some major failure patterns. I've seen these too. I mean, I've totally seen them, especially around HR, when it comes to how their old-fashioned idea of, individual accomplishment, and how do you bonus people on their individual accomplishment, when we're trying to create collaborative teams that, build each other up and help
Right.
each other succeed.
The annual reviews and
Yes.
just kinds of performance-based bonuses and things
Yeah.
like that.
So how do you navigate that space? I mean, I wouldn't say you just come in and vanquish them all right away, right?
No, there's no flaming sword for this kind of work. I mean,
That would be nice.
It'd be great if I can find one. I'll definitely
right.
post
Just
about
bring
it.
bring in the guy with the sword and deal
Point
with
him
that.
at HR. Finance is next, right? So it's interesting. I mean, I think that one of what I'm finding now, and I don't think this is necessarily new for folks who have been doing enterprise agile work for a while, is that you do have to have real clear and unequivocal support from the leadership of the organization.
Yes.
That's super important because frankly you have to make changes that can accommodate this style of working that we supposedly are all on board. Like,
Right.
okay, we've decided we're going to be agile, or we're going
Right.
to be innovative.
Right.
And
you have to decide which toes you're going to step on sometimes.
for sure, yeah. Or if there's ways to construct an environment where you maybe bifurcate the regular operational stuff that needs to still have these structures in place
Yes.
from some kind of sheltered, if you will, innovation capacity where it's safe to do experiments, it's safe to fail.
Yes.
And you might have completely different cultures in those two environments. I mean,
Yeah.
it depends on what the goals are of the transformation, right? But I think
Yeah, my friend has talked to so Clay Christensen, I think, said something about innovation by isolation.
Sure.
And that's, I think, what you're saying is a great
Yeah.
concept to make it. It's okay. We're innovating and we're safe here to do that. That's what you're
Right.
saying. Do that off on the side. Don't muck with the core business.
Right, and I think that there are some gotchas or stuff you have to look out for even in doing that, because things can backfire as well.
Yeah,
in
that's
a
what
number
I
of
mean by
ways.
stepping on toes. You're going to step on toes no matter what you do.
That is true.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
people
got to break
pers-
some eggs to make an omelet, as they
Right.
say, right? It's sort of which eggs to break. And I think that there's a risk of having the sort of cool kids syndrome, where
Yes.
it's like, all right, we've put all these funky, millennials, with designer glasses and Macs in this, cool innovation space,
Yeah.
and you might get resentment from the rest of the organization of like, well, why are they getting all the fun stuff?
Right.
We're certainly seeing that in some clients that I'm working with now.
Sure.
So that's something that, I don't have the perfect answer for that, but it's something to be aware of, to be mitigated. I think another thing that's a little bit dangerous is you can't just throw everybody in the beanbag room with the whiteboards and expect innovation to happen.
Right.
Like, I think there's a little bit of a misconception.
But you do need beanbags, huh?
You need beanbags, absolutely.
Okay.
You got to have a place to relax.
Right.
It's
right. All right.
it's
So
very
buy your
important.
beanbags, folks. That's necessary.
I haven't taken out stock in any beanbag companies, but maybe I should think about it.
We used to have them here. But,
Yeah, right. But I think what I'm getting at is that there, even within an environment where things are safe to fail, or perhaps even more so, you do need a certain amount of structure, like a structured process and approach
Yes.
for leading these innovation projects, right?
Right,
Like
right.
You have
Sure.
to have goals that you can measure. You have to kind of build camaraderie among the team so that everyone's kind of pulling together. There's work to it,
Yeah.
right? It's not just you put them in a WeWork and walk
Yeah.
away for 3 months,
Right. So you're saying innovation itself needs structure, needs some sort of boundaries or some actually a little bit of administration.
Yeah, I think so.
A little bit of even of HR. Like the two things you said that were troubling for enterprise agile teams, you need a little bit of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think one of the things that we've been playing with in an engagement that I have now is this idea of maybe carving out inside the innovation capacity kind of like mini outposts of those corporate functions, like a mini procurement or a mini HR,
I see.
where there's a sort of localized team or person who's responsible for that can be the translation mechanism across the blood-brain barrier, or however you want to think about it, right? Like where they can sort of understand the constraints. Because look, the constraints coming from finance are real, right? Like maybe you're a public company, maybe that you have offices all over the world, there's real money at stake.
Right.
So we do want to have respect for that containment of risk.
Yes.
But also, like, you can't be afraid to go to the cloud for security reasons because Amazon's going to crush you if that's what's holding you back, right? So it's like you can either die slowly or you can take some chances and experiment. But I think there's ways of kind of controlling that risk.
Yeah, I love this.
Yeah.
This is cool because I would bet you there are people in HR, in legal, in budgeting, or finance who want to do innovative things and are feeling that innovation, drive, but are stuck in their organization. So if they're part of your,
almost certainly,
if they're part of this emerging innovation area, which has a little bit of each one of those, those people can then thrive there and they'll help to transform the organization with this experimental innovation place.
Yeah, but the thing you have to do is you have to go talk to them. Right. So I hear from teams all the time, we're like, our hands are tied because finance won't let us do this or that. And the thing is, when you actually go talk to finance people, and you go talk to the CFO or people in his office or her office, and you talk to folks in HR, it turns out they're actually really smart, reasonable people who, when you move the sort of the rules engine of bureaucracy out of the way and start having face-to-face conversations with them, it's amazing how much incredible problem solving you can do and bring everyone to the table. And so I think that's the sort of kind of an obvious point that when you're in a big organization, you don't necessarily think about all the time because we're so used to sending emails back and forth to anonymous departments that say yes or no, your project can move forward. If you can get off the phone and away from the email and go and see them and say, hey, listen, here's the thing we're trying to do. The CEO says this is important and this, we're trying to find new markets or new revenue streams for the company and we feel hindered in this way, and is there a way that you can help me?
Yes.
And I've seen folks that are in that role who are excited to help design the right kinds of administrative structures that would actually support innovation.
Yeah.
But it means you actually have to use your face to talk to them and have a real human conversation.
Right.
Break down those barriers.
You're making me think of that show Lost, where they speak of the others.
Right.
Sure. So it's like the person in legal that you never talk to and all these people you never talk to, they're the others.
Yeah.
And it's okay to go have lunch with them maybe.
Absolutely.
And so it sounds like what you're able to do is come in and do that. Actually go talk to those people.
I certainly can, and I think what I really try to focus on is bringing up the idea that they can do that as well, helping to sort of facilitate the conversation, trying to sort of suss out where the blockers are and what is actually important to those departments, because they usually have very real and legitimate concerns. It's not like they're trying to stamp out all innovation in the company.
No.
Right? They just have a mandate or they have incentives that they have to respond to.
Sure.
And so those are it's all just models. Get all that stuff on the whiteboard and we can sort of work out a balance that works for everyone.
So what you're doing, in my words, is you're creating a community. And you're creating what ultimately was some sort of innovation community, which, obviously this can be done in the main part of the company as well. But what you're doing is, if you're creating this innovation space where there's a little bit of legal, a little bit of HR, a little bit of finance, and all the other things that go with it, it's cross-functional.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
truly cross-functional.
Yeah.
It's
beyond
cross-organizational.
Product design and engineering.
Yeah.
There's all these other functions
That's
too.
super cool. Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot because that's I don't even call it a team, because a team, you tend to think of a team as kind of small or something like
Yeah.
that. The community can be big as long as those
Yeah, I
people.
like the word community. It makes a lot of sense.
It is like community because, like you live in a community, right, where you have your direct neighbors, but you
Right.
also have other people that are in the community, but you don't see them every day.
Right.
So,
But you know that they're there.
and they're part of your community.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that interesting. Yeah.
That's a good metaphor for thinking about how to build this kind of innovation culture. And I think that the community, as it's forming, it creates its own new culture with its own sort of paradigms and language and
Right.
metaphors and things.
Yes.
And so then you have this challenge or opportunity of how being able to kind of translate that new culture across the barrier to sort of the rest of the organization,
Not
which is
easy.
a whole other level
Right.
of difficulty. And I think that's kind of where the leadership comes in as well, because I think it's important for us to talk also about the role of the executives in all this. I think they can sometimes, in my experience, be a little too checked out on the innovation stuff. They're like, oh yes, I'm going to sign off on you go and create this innovation lab, and like that, I can't wait to see what you come up with, right? But there's this level of involvement that's really required of senior execs that are taking this on.
Yeah.
To be, helping with those conversations and not leading by fiat,
Right.
but actually creating conditions of support
Yes.
where people can have, as you guys know, psychological safety, like the ability to give feedback and figure out kind of what's working and what's not, and be really honest about that with ourselves.
Very hard to do, but good executives can be involved, but also step out of the way.
Right.
Like in stepping out of the way, meaning that they're no longer like pushing their ideas onto the organization, saying there's new stuff coming in. I'm going to get out of the way of those new ideas. I will support experiments with the new ideas, but my thinking, which has led to where we are now, which is great. Okay, we got to this level.
Right.
Now my thinking might have to step back and let some new thinking in.
Sure.
And the humility to let that happen is not so easy.
No, it's
in
definitely
executive
not.
management. A lot of times executives are like, I know what to do. Don't tell me what to do. And
Right.
It's hard. I mean,
Yeah,
because
I mean,
they got somewhere. They got successful by getting somewhere. Now what? Now
Yeah,
I
that's a
think
really interesting point. Like they've been sort of trained and incentivized around having all the answers.
Right.
I'm the person who's supposed to be looking at all the information my underlings are bringing to me and then making the decision.
Right.
And I think that the idea of turning that on its head, which is frankly absolutely necessary for doing any innovative work, is sort of pushing the decision making down and out to the teams.
Yes.
That's very counterintuitive for a modern executive, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not something that they're used to.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of power in it, in that they can. The best leader behaviors that I've seen is there's usually like one of two types of communication coming out of their mouth. They're either asking questions that reveal or move the conversation forward and asking lots and lots of questions, and then maybe synthesizing what everyone has said and giving some focus and direction.
Yes.
And if they really need to only be doing one of those two things in their communication, right? Otherwise, it's potentially waste. But rare is the executive that can really operate at that level.
Yeah,
So
they-
I'd love to see more of them.
They need coaching too, I think, right?
They do indeed,
Yeah.
absolutely.
The problem is they don't necessarily know that they need coaching.
That is true. That is
So-
true. Yeah, it is available though.
That's
There's
right.
plenty of coaching for execs if someone is courageous enough to feel like they can grow in that area and take it on.
Yeah, so just curious about Modern Agile, and what do you think of this thing? You've seen some of these principles on this sticker. How does that fit into your world, or not fit, or what?
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it fits really well. These really speak to me. I think that we've talked about a few things here already around making safety a prerequisite. I think is really critical.
Especially for innovation, as you said. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because
innovate.
you have to be able to take risks,
Yes.
and that has to be done in a safe manner. And I think that people will have a lot of discomfort around change happening in their organization, and that's something that you have to feel safe that you can surface your concerns and that they'll be treated with respect and compassion. So I think that's really important. Certainly, the idea of delivering value continuously, to me, is critical.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's the goal. Right. Like
Oh, yeah.
We definitely need to be doing that. We've talked about experimentation and learning rapidly. which requires, often a change in mindset,
Mm-hmm.
moving from a fixed to more of a growth mindset.
Yes.
A lot of us are talking about these days.
Yes.
And then making people awesome. The first time I saw this, I loved that. Just that statement right there is so sort of deceptively simple, right?
God,
and very elegant, right?
It's
in
hard.
simplicity. But it's very, very hard, right? Like,
It is.
what really makes people jump out of bed in the morning and run to the office to work on that next experiment or that next task, like creating that environment.
Yeah.
This is one of those things like culture where with making people awesome, it's not something you can necessarily operate on directly,
Yeah.
but you can create the conditions
Right.
in which it grows.
That's right.
And I think that's very exciting.
It's very generative in that regard.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's a high bar. It's a really high bar, and I think that's okay.
Yeah.
If we get to make people excellent, it's pretty darn
Yeah.
good.
Better than before would be
Right.
great.
Exactly. Oh, that's cool. It's good to hear your take on it. I mean, again, there are principles that apply to all kinds of endeavors. So I look at this and go, yeah, this applies to finance. It applies to
for sure.
HR. Now, how does it apply? That's up to the practitioners to say, yeah, here's how we're bringing the HR function into these modern agile principles.
Yeah.
Here's how we're now making safety a prerequisite in HR. Here's how we're experimenting and learning rapidly.
Right.
Things that we're trying. Maybe we're going to get rid of our 28-page performance review per employee and go to like a two-pager or a one-pager.
Right.
Experiments, like crazy experiments like that.
Sure. Yeah. And I think it has to be the folks on the ground who are living that world have to figure it out themselves. There's no sort of structured model that you can just superimpose on an organization and turn the crank and make it work.
That's right.
This is real hard work. It's
is.
certainly worth it and
It is.
necessary,
Mm-hmm.
but it's something that you really have to kind of roll up your sleeves and get involved in.
Yeah.
And as a group, sort of figure out what's going to work in your company's context.
Yeah. Either you transform yourself or you just coast along and eventually die. I mean,
Right.
lose you good people, lose market share. Yeah. I mean, so you got to dive in and make the transformations, even though they're painful. And
Sure.
everything you've mentioned has resonated with me 100%. I mean, even now we achieve success in the innovation area. Now we want to bring it back into the main company, and that is a very slippery, difficult transformation to make in its own right.
Yeah, how do you make it so that the mothership doesn't kill the nice new shiny thing that you just spent all this time crafting?
Yeah.
Right?
So that we could have a whole show just about that. I
Yeah.
think, too.
Well, I'm happy to come back and talk about that sometime.
Please do. Please do. So thank you, Sam, for coming.
Yeah, thanks
It
for
was a
having me,
pleasure
Joel.
talking to you.
It's great.
And we will have you back another time. And thanks for watching the show. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, please share this with others. There's also a podcast version of this. We take the audio, and put it up on podcast so you can listen to it on your drive or your commute. And we look forward to seeing you on other episodes. Thanks again.
Thanks.